That song is so precious to me because it is a song that we grew up singing all the time with my parents. My mom and dad would go to different churches around town or around the island, and we used to, all five of us, my siblings and I, would tag along with my mom and dad and sing this as a family song. Kanaka vai vai. So it was always a powerful message for us to be able to share that all the time. And in the middle of it, my mom would share about the story of this song and how the young rich man, he asked Jesus, what can I do to have everlasting life, to be in heaven with you? And Christ said to give everything away. Everything you own means nothing. If you can let go of everything, then you will be in heaven with me. And the rich man couldn't do it. He couldn't give it up. Those things became more important to him. And he gave up eternal life. And so it was always a powerful story to me. Today, obviously through the songs, we talk about aloha quite a bit. And we dive deep into aloha, but maybe not enough of aloha, because as I perform for Tihati Productions in Waikiki, as I do weddings on a daily basis. Yesterday I did three weddings. And so in every opportunity that I have to share aloha, I share it and I go deep with what is aloha. And I'm so thankful that I'm able to have the podium today, have the podium anytime, whether I'm on stage in Waikiki or anywhere for that matter, that it does come back to aloha. And aloha is more than hello and goodbye. I need you to understand that. I usually start off with a chant that asks for permission for us to be here. So I'm going to recite this chant, and it's a oli aloha that is one of many, many oli aloha that we utilize to go into the forest or go into the ocean and to conduct our events as we go. And this particular one talks about the fragrances of flowers. And as I wear the puakinikini, and I cannot help but inhale the beautiful, beautiful fragrance of this flower. And I think of onauna. Onauna means fragrance. And we would recite this oli aloha to express the sense of the forest, the smell of the flowers. In this case, the ohia lehua. The beauty that surrounds us within the forest. And it's that beauty that embraces us and allows us to be there. So this is the chant. O naunai ka me kalihua e halelehua no ia na kano o kauno ye ano inelia nei o kaiki mai ai ki mai no ko ki puno me ke aloha. Aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. And we inhale, and we feel, and we see all the beauty that surrounds us. Because we were no better than nature itself. We're a part of nature. We're at one with nature. And we have to be reminded of that quite often, because of our consciousness, we set ourselves apart from everything else in this world, and we're not separated from anything else. We are a part of it all. A part of it all. And this isn't even my message for today, but I felt that we needed to go there for you to have an understanding of the depth of this incredible power, this force called aloha. And it's something that we have to know intimately in order to conduct our lives by being pono, or righteous. We have to know aloha. The ohia lehua, which is mentioned within that oli aloha, it is one that begins this journey of strength for me in the talk that I shared today. And there is a quote that I want to read because it is about strength. It is about what does strength look like. And I need my slide changer here. But really, what does strength look like? This is the ohia lehua. And it is a beautiful, beautiful flower, a beautiful tree. And and it speaks perfectly of strength. The lehua is the first tree that springs up from a recent lava flow. It's for that reason that when we speak in Hawaiian and we speak of people who are skilled, strong, and beloved, they're often referred to as pua lehua or lehua flowers. They, like the lehua, have a kind of resilience, a strength, and a grace about them. If you were to go to the Big Island and go to Kilauea volcano and you go to the older lava flows or even the newer lava flows, you can see the first plant breaking through the cracks within the lava is the ohia lehua tree. And it's so beautiful to see. And I speak about it sometimes where the many legends of Pele talks about the destruction of land, of people, of whatever. But that destruction also makes way for new life to spring forth. Resilience, strength, beauty. This second slide is a quote from ʻŌlelo Noeau from Mary Kavenapukui. He lālā kamahele no ka lāʻau kui ka pali, a far-reaching branch of trees standing on the cliff. And it boasts of a strong person who, like the tree on the cliff, can withstand the gales, powerful winds and rains and everything else. And it forms according to the elements that it's surrounded by, and it has to live through. So today's discussion is about ʻikaika. And for many of us who are here, of course, ʻikaika means strong. And then hoʻoikaika, to make strong, to become, to strengthen yourself. So this is important for us to recognize and to realize that we don't just become strong, or we're not just born strong. There's a process that we go through that creates that opportunity for us to strengthen and to become and to understand. And all of the experiences that we go through in life allows us to become strong, to hoʻoikaika. And we can say it in different ways, whereas Hoʻoikaika Kino, or the bodybuilding exercise, or pili Hoʻoikaika Kino, relating to bodybuilding as athletics. Pohaku Hoʻoikaika, which is stone lifting, to test one's strength, and we'll come to that as I talk about Kamehameha a little bit. And then the last is E Hoʻoikaika Anaʻau E Hana I Keia. I'm going to make a great effort to do this. I'm going to make a great effort to learn and to do everything that I can to strengthen this body, strengthen this mind, to strengthen my spirit as well. So I'm going to come back to this title quite often of when I think about strength, what do I see? What does strength look like to me? The first thing comes to mind for me is when somebody asks me about strength, I think of how much weight I used to lift in high school. I'm going to boast a little bit because in high school I was a weakling. I mean, I was strong, but it was after high school, like 18 years old, 19 years old, where I really filled out and became super strong. And I used to easily bench press over 400 pounds, squat, deadlift, all of that stuff. My totals were pretty good. And that helped me to be confident in any sport that I did. And I did judo, and I wasn't necessarily great at the skill sets of judo, but because of how strong I was, that allowed me to defeat seasoned black belts because they couldn't move me. They couldn't, do what they were trained their whole life to do because I was so strong. So I used to feel so proud about that, about me being strong as a young man. So it's always funny when I think about it, that now in my older self, I'm not that strong anymore, sadly. I could be if I worked out, but I don't. And so it's interesting that that's the first thing that comes to mind. But now in my older self, in my wiser self, in my more perceptive self, I have to think about strength in its other forms as well, not just bodily strength. So we see it every day in the ebb and flow of life. Here in Hawaii, if you go hiking, you see it in the majesty of the cliff sides, the mountain sides. If you're driving on the east side of the island, to look at the ko'olaus is just incredible, and it moves you to a whole different mindset. It opens your mind up to the beauty of the cliffs, but also to the danger of the cliffs as well. And there's an intense power that you feel and you inhale when you look at these cliffs. We see it in the pounding surf when the waves are 40, 50 feet on the North Shore, and how incredible these mountains of water move through the outer reefs and then into Waimea Bay. And then you see the surfers that ride those waves, and you talk about strength in action and courage in action. It's quite incredible to see. If you pay attention to the seabirds that fly, especially that of the Iwa bird, which I'm from Haleiwa, so that's, I grew up watching the huge schools of Iwa bird flying above. And we always knew that when we saw the Iwa, there was a chance for a storm to come in. So we paid attention to the birds. Little did I know that the Iwa could stay afloat for weeks and months at a time without even touching the ground, soaring over the great ocean to find food. And they didn't come down. They would stay up there for that long. How incredible that is. The things we don't even know of, but yet if we're given the opportunity to realize these things, how it puts everything in perspective of who we are. Every experience, good and bad, through life help us to develop our resilience, our resolve, our wisdom, our faith, our strength. And yet we each have our own story of how we got there and how we are getting there, because none of us have got there, but how we are getting there. So we are born helpless, barely able to turn our heads when we are born, to move our bodies, to even turn over. But after months of laying down and kicking and moving, eventually the body gains its strength. The muscles start to figure things out. Then you're able to turn over. You're able to get on your foreheads and crawl a little bit. Then you strengthen some more after crawling for a while. Then you're able to walk after a short amount of time, which we think is a long amount of time. And then you're able to stand and walk and then run. That is the process of our human body gaining strength. We move in coordination with our thoughts and eventually our words. Everything we experience, the elements of life, eventually molds us into a hardened yet pliable human being that has learned to adapt and overcome in order to survive, much like the ohia tree at the beginning. So Charles Fillmore in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary says this of strength: the energy of God, freedom from weakness, stability of character, power to withstand temptation, capacity to accomplish. Strength is physical, mental, and spiritual. All strength originates in spirit. The thought and the word spiritually expressed being the manifestation. I'm going to leave that up for a little bit, just so you can ruminate on it. Now, there are many stories that I can share with you today regarding strength and what strength looks like. But I chose 3 topics. The first, of course, is Kamehameha. Second is Queen Liliuokalani. And then the third is our story, is who we are. Now, in thinking of King Kamehameha, how many of you have even studied a little bit into our monarchs? Of course. So beautiful. So you may know a little bit of the stories. Again, it's a fraction of the information that really you should dive into and learn a little bit of. This is the statue of our king, Kamehameha Nui. So his life kind of mirrors that of Jesus' life at birth. It was prophesied that Jesus would come. It was prophesied that Kamehameha would come. He was born on a night, Kamehameha was born on a night where they think that Halley's Comet was flying over. And so in the stories that were passed down, the comet was mentioned, and so they took it back to when about was the comet visible to us here in Hawaii, and that was 1758. And because they expressed it as being cold and windy and rainy, put it around the time of November that he was born. And after he was born, the king, Alapa'i Nui, tried to have Kamehameha killed, and his name at the time was Pai'ea. And he tried to have Pai'ea killed upon his birth because the stories being told was that Kamehameha would rise to power, overthrow the king at that time, and unite the islands of Hawaii. So he tried hard to take Pai'ea out as a baby. Of course, the story goes, he was hid with his mother's cousin who raised him and taught him the ways of a young man. So I'm going to go through his story. So after his uncle tried to have him killed, he was raised in secret by his aunt, Kahaʻopulani. And at 5 years old, his uncle, the high chief, no longer wanted him killed for some reason. He had a change of heart, allowed the boy to come back, and he renamed him from Pai'ea to Kamehameha. By the way, Pai'ea means hard-shelled crab. So if that's any indication of the power that this boy would have as he got older, and then changed his name to Kamehameha, which means the lonely one. Kamehameha was trained in the traditions, knowledge, and skills needed for a young chief. He became expert in all the physical games which built his agility, coordination, battle skills. He also became an expert at strategy through playing the game konane, which is Hawaiian checkers, and nobody could beat him at that game, which eventually translated to his skill sets at warfare as well. A brilliant mind. He excelled in everything from swimming, surfing, battle games, weapons, and fighting training, also in his genealogical studies, and so on and so forth. He was physically imposing. It is said that he stood 7 feet tall. And they know this because of the length of his cape. They know it because of the height of his spear that he would hold, that he stood 7 feet tall. Incredible. Weighed about 300. Again, this is just a guess of how big this man really was. About 300 pounds or so. Muscle, strength, incredible power this man had. He was an imposing figure just to look at him. And many of the writings from the Westerners who came described him as such as well. He was so strong that he was able to lift the naha stone, which in legend, whoever was able to lift this stone would be the one to unite all the islands. This stone, by the way, weighs over 3 tons. And he was able to lift and move it. With every victory and every loss in battle, he got smarter and more tactical and was not afraid to utilize new strategies like Western weapons he included in his fighting as well. And that is really what helped him to overtake all the other leaders on the islands to unite Hawaii as one. He was innovative, he had foresight, and was determined in his quest. He fulfilled the prophecies by uniting all the Hawaiian Islands in 1810 under one rule. And from that time forward, before that time was a lot of warfare. The kings all fought against each other, trying to unite or trying to take over the islands for themselves. And once Kamehameha did that, it brought peace to the islands. Relative peace, I would say, to the islands. Kamehameha was the epitome of physical and mental strength. His spiritual strength came in his belief in Kukailimoku, which was a war god, who gave him that confidence to go and battle. In all of the prophecies, in all of the stories, he needed to utilize Kukailimoku to be able to unite all the islands. However, he also was the one to unite the islands in peace as well. So he was the epitome of strength in that way. So again, this is only highlights of Kamehameha, so I'm going to move on to Queen Liliʻuokalani, but I implore you to go ahead and dive deeper. Go to Iolani Palace or go to Bishop Museum and dive into the history of our Hawaiian people. It is a beautiful, beautiful and prideful, I guess, the stories that we take from our Polynesian people. And so much more than that. So let's move on to Queen Liliʻuokalani. She came into power in a very tumultuous period. King David Kalakaua traveled to San Francisco, and he died while in San Francisco. When the word got back, Queen Liliʻuokalani had to be the one to take over the monarchy. A lot happened during King Kalakaua's time where he signed the Bayonet Treaty, which stripped the monarchy of their power and allowed the businessmen from the sugar industry and all the other industries that were powerful, rising to power here, it gave them the power and took away the power from the monarchy. And under duress, the king signed the Bayonet Treaty, hence the name Bayonet Treaty, was that he was forced to sign under gun. So when she came into power, she tried to redo all of that in that first year. And of course, the businessmen who had all of that power didn't like it. So they saw her as a threat to their power. They saw her vulnerable to overthrow as well. So they took that power from her. So you talk about strength and a woman who was raised to be a monarch, raised to be a queen, and yet having that power stripped away from her and her family. But that didn't stop her. She went into house arrest once Hawaii was overthrown. They put her into house arrest. And while in house arrest, she was still able to communicate with her people by way of her songs, her over 150 or even way more songs than that, but of the songs that we are familiar with. She assumed the role of queen, of course, again, during this very tumultuous time. The sugar planters. I'm going to dive into the history a little bit, so in case some of you don't know what it's about. The sugar planters and businessmen of the islands instigated an overthrow, fearing loss of revenue and the influence of a popular queen. They prompted the U.S. Marines to march on Iolani Palace and forced the queen to surrender the Hawaiian kingdom to the United States in 1893. Acting as leader of a Stand Firm movement, she advocated against U.S. annexation and in turn was imprisoned inside the Iolani Palace for 8 months. A provisional government was established and named the Republic of Hawaii with Sanford B. Dole as president in 1894. The Queen had an ally in President Cleveland during that time. However, the presidency switched hands to President McKinley, and under McKinley, Hawaii was annexed. She continued her fight in 1909 to support and care for orphan and indigent children of Hawaii. She continued her fight to restore the Kingdom of Hawaii until her death in November 11, 1917. She was the most beloved Hawaiian monarch. She continually fought for her Hawaiian people, culture, and way of life. She went through a lot. She went through a lot and never gave up on her culture, her Hawaiian people. She fought for the restoration of the Hawaiian monarchy, although it never happened. An acknowledgement of reparations only came during the Clinton administration, where they acknowledged that Hawaii was illegally taken and illegally overthrown, but nothing was ever done, or nothing had ever come from that, except the proclamation that it had happened. I can only imagine the turmoil, the sadness that she experienced during that time. But it made her strong. She still had life in her. Although she was not the queen anymore, she still provided ways to give her people hope. She still provided ways to allow her power and what she had established to be able to help those that were less fortunate. Her heart was full of aloha, the aloha that we talked about at the beginning of this lesson. The aloha that Zamar sang about is the aloha that this queen exuded every moment. She was the one that expressed her dismay when she came back from a trip and getting off of the ship. She hears her people say, aloha, and she stopped and she's like, what is this word? What is this word that you are saying? It is not the aloha that I know. She scolded her people because they took our precious, precious aloha and made it something into more of a, Hollywoodized version of the word. Yes. So it really upset her, and she wanted to bring it back to that truer meaning of what was aloha. So I look at the queen and her plight, and I feel every time that I see the Iolani Palace or I pass by, It brings such sadness to see what our Hawaiian people had to endure during that time, let alone having to deal with Western influence and disease and everything else that wiped our people out, to know that we became a lot more dependent upon Western influences and let our culture dissipate over time. Where we were able, pre-Westernization, to support the population of over 1 million Hawaiians, ancient Hawaiians during that time, because of the way that our systems were built, from the lo'i, all of the farms, to the fishing, the fish ponds that were created, was all for sustainability, to be able to support these huge numbers of people before Western contact. Once we became more dependent upon Westerns, all of the things that we had established over hundreds and hundreds of years would dissipate in time. But when I look at Queen Liliuokalani, I see an immense amount of strength in her to continue to have done what she did. When I think of strength, I think of us. I think of our story and what we go through. I think of my mother, who battled cancer from 1994 to 2013. I think of her resilience. I think of her determination to beat cancer. And although she lived for that long, in the end, which there was the end in 2013, she lived every moment of that with every breath that she had to share to share her breath of life with us, to continually teach us, to continually share with us how we needed to remain connected to our source. It was beautiful to watch my mom still be able to transcend her struggles. I think of her smiles, her laughter, her resolve, her positivity, through her grace. I think of her beauty. And then I think of this, where sometimes beauty can only come from the struggles that we go through. Beauty can only come from the chaos that we experience. Because without that struggle, without the chaos, there's no formation of who we need to be. We don't develop into the strength. We're not molded to the elements that surround us, that harden us to be strong, to be able to share these incredible stories. I think of all of us who struggle in our daily walk. So those of you who may deal with health issues, those of you who may deal with not knowing what the plan is for your life, maybe trying to figure out how to be prosperous in this lifetime. I think of all of us who perhaps have gone through a divorce and now are finding ways to mend our lives to be able to move forward. And as we go through those experiences, we realize that maybe at the lowest point of that, we don't see the strength yet. We think everything is weakness, everything is heartache, there's no chance for our survival. And yet, when we come through that, my goodness, we realize how powerful we really are. One of my favorite quotes is by Khalil Gibran, and he says, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." How many of you have your own scars? How many of you are still on that journey of developing that strength? So get ready for more scars. There's no other way. If you want the strength, we're going to have to go through the gamut, right? We're going to have to harden ourselves to prepare ourselves for what's to come. And this is physically, mentally, spiritually. We have to know who we are. We have to know what aloha is so that we can share it on a daily basis. We have to know that people may not know who you are. People may not know who I am, but in the way that I hug you, in the way that I look at you, in the way that I feel you, you know that all I am is aloha. And I want you to know that all you are is aloha. that there's no separation. And I think every time that I get up here, I talk about that belief in separation from the source. That's the only thing that is a problem for us in this life, because we think that there is separation. We think that titles are the things that allow us to be what we're supposed to be, and they're not. It causes separation. There's no difference from you and I. There's no difference from within the chant that I shared earlier between the forest, the flowers, the wind, the birds, the rocks that surround us. Everything is connected. We're all connected. The ohia lehua tree that grows through the lava, or the one that clings to the cliffside and whose hair is all that way because the wind is relentless blowing against that tree. It has learned to be strong in the elements that it lives in. We have to learn to be strong in the elements that we live in. Life doesn't get easier or more forgiving. We get stronger and more resilient. It's by Dr. Steve Maraboli. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm just going to say that. And then taking it back to the Bible, one of my favorite scriptures is Isaiah 40:31. And growing up, we would sing this song all the time. And I'm going to read it from 29, though. He giveth power to the faint, and to them that have no might he increaseth strength. Even the youth shall find strength, or shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. And then the last line of the song was, teach me, Lord, to wait. There are many scriptures in the Bible that I could quote that talk about strength. But I like that verse because it gives me an understanding that if I allow myself to be open to Spirit, if I allow myself to really understand the strength that is already within me, then one day I will soar like the Eva birds for months at a time. I will soar like the eagle. That's the strength that I'm looking for within me. In closing, I wrote a poem on my drive from a wedding from Ko'olina, or Paradise Cove, and on my way back, this recurring thought just kept hitting me one after the other. So I couldn't get it out until I got home and wrote it down, so I had to try and remember it on my drive. And I just called it My Strength, for no better title. But I want you to close your eyes and really listen to the words of this poem. And see how it resembles you. See how it affects your journey, or has affected your journey. There is an echo I hear beyond my suffering and fear, which rings like a beacon, a pathway, a lighthouse, as it calls my name. As I bow my head and push into the driving rains of doubt and worry, I can feel my legs getting stronger with every gust of wind. I can feel the pull of destiny with every hope of meeting the sun, and the push of every stone that I leave behind. I may shiver from the cold and cry in agony with every step, but I press on toward that finish line. I am filled with inspiration and lifted to new heights because I have been made strong in this life's fight. I will rise above time after time because the Spirit within me is of the divine. The voice within me is of the divine. I am of the divine. When I think about my connection to Spirit, it's not something that I am distant from. It is something that I am. When I think of the aloha that I share, it's not just a word. It's who I am. When I think about the bowl of light that we all must tend in order for this light to shine bright and pure, I don't see it as a separate bowl from who I am. I am the bowl. I am the light. Heaven is here within me. Christ is here within me. I do not walk separate from it. My life is your life. My breath is your breath. When we aloha each other, we commit everything that we have to each other. This is the breath I share with you. Take a deep breath. Release that breath. Take another deep breath. Release. And at this last breath, take it as deep as you can and hold it. Hold it. Because this is where our connection to divinity really is. Take that breath as deep as you can. Release that breath. Aloha, aloha, aloha.